Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican about the interesting people, places, and issues of northern New Mexico and all of New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and today we are speaking to Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales about the work he's done over the past 7 years. We're about ready to go into the last term of Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's tenure in office. 2 terms in New Mexico is all you get. And we want to talk to Lieutenant Governor Morales about all the work he's been doing, especially in the field of education. Welcome.
It's so good to be here with you, Inez. Thank you for all the work and all the information that you share with people all across the state. So it's an honor to be here on your podcast today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was fortunate enough to give a speech on Saturday to the New Mexico, I think, Historic Genealogical Society, something like that was the name. And one of the things we talked about was local newspapers and all the information they have. And when you think about some parts of the state, they don't have that kind of robust local media anymore. So at the New Mexican, we're really working to do more stories from all parts of the state. So even if you don't have your local paper the way you did, you'll still get information.
It really is. And I'm fortunate where I'm from, the Silver City Daily Press is still up and running. And it's
Yay.
so informative to get local news out there. And that's what you've done. But you've expanded it across the state. And I think that's extremely helpful because we're all connected in one way or another.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and speaking of Silver City and education, you guys had an exciting time with your president, Joseph Shepard, a few, months ago. And it was probably, had there been maybe more robust news coverage from everybody, that situation might not have grown to where it did.
Yeah, I think that's where the local media. I know that our local media was covering some of the stories, but I know that that was done statewide as well, and also appreciative of the work that's being done. That's really sharing, moving forward, of how the university is doing all they can to establish, to have that university be all that we know that it can be.
Right. Yeah, I have friends that went there and I know they loved going to school in Silver City and they loved the campus and just kind of that feeling of really being in a college town and not being competing with everything else like you do in bigger cities. So I know it's a great school.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. So as the lieutenant governor, obviously you are responsible for different parts of what's going on in terms of what the governor's agenda is. And one of her big pushes was in early childhood education. And last week, she announced that she wants universal childcare accessible for any parent who wants it. And that's something you've been involved in since the very beginning and the founding of the early childhood education and care department. So talk about what that was like helping set that up and what's going on with that.
Yeah, that's correct, Inez. I'm fortunate to work with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, and the people of the state of New Mexico are fortunate to have a working relationship that your governor and lieutenant governor has. It's not like that all across the country. A lot of times there just doesn't seem to be much communication between the two offices. That has never been the case here in New Mexico, and I'm fortunate to be working with such a leader like the governor who early on saw the value of early childhood education and recognizing that this is an area that we can invest heavily to ensure that we can best meet the needs of the youngest learners at the most critical time in the stages of their life. Of course, that comes with needed funding, that comes with needed support, and the legislature has been wonderful partners to help us with that. So we did make a wonderful announcement last week that went across the nation, that people across the nation are asking, how was New Mexico able to do it? And it really comes down to a vision, having a team that's going to work hand in hand to make this happen and make it a reality. And then the willingness to put the investment. And I want to stress that because I often hear about the taxes potentially being raised or not. When I often hear about some of the challenges of how that's going to be paid, it really came with the vision. And when the governor advocated and working with the legislature and the public to pass the permanent fund, that was a game changer. But it didn't stop there. We invested 320 million with the help of Senator John Arthur Smith, who just recently passed away, and the help of Doreen Gallegos, who was in the House of Representatives, who carried this early childhood education trust fund. We started with 320 million, got scaled back to 300 million. Today, that fund sits at $10 billion. $10 billion that goes to make sure that our families across the state will have universal access to childcare, knowing their children are safe.
Yeah. And I think what's so important is that there's a recognition that so many of the issues that we face in New Mexico, you have to go to the root causes. And the root causes a lot of times are that children are not safe when they're growing up. So, not that the government should raise your kids, but if you have a childcare situation or if you have home visits from a trained practitioner, that means parents will have better tools to help their kids. And also, parents can go to work without worrying about their children. So they may be able to be in a better economic situation going forward.
And that's exactly it. And, Secretary Elizabeth Groginski, working close together with Secretary Mariana Padilla, who was responsible for establishing the Children's Cabinet, and then our higher education secretary, Stephanie Rodriguez, that was instrumental because we have all of our entities of education working in collaboration. And what that does is that really gives the opportunity to have parents go out into work, go out to help with the economy that's boosting, to help for small businesses, to help for gross receipts that are taking place within local governments. And most importantly, recognizing that the children are going to be safe, that they're going to be in an environment where they can thrive. That was the vision that we have, because the reality of it is we have a healthy general fund. We have a healthy budget in the state of New Mexico. I can remember being in the state Senate where we were at 0% reserves. We weren't able to help families. Right now, we sit at 36% reserves. With all of our permanent funds and our childhood trust funds, that's how we were able to make this happen. So in a sense, we're investing taxpayer dollars right back into taxpayer and families across the state of New Mexico.
Right. I know when we had a young son, childcare was a major, major concern. And my husband used to joke that the tuition was more expensive than law school was, what we paid for childcare. And I know some people are like, well, I didn't get that help. Why should they? And I think that's kind of a short-sighted way to look at it. I just think how freeing it can be for young people if you guys can build out the capacity. And that's a big part of it. So how will you be able to do that, build the capacity so there's location, so there's teachers, all of that?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Knowing that we're opening up 12,000 to 13,000 spots for families all across the state, you need the workforce who's going to provide that opportunity to do that. And knowing that the investment and also raising the amount of dollars that are paid out to our early childhood education providers, that's important that that's recognized, because we can't have a system if we don't have those providers and those true professionals there. And this takes into account raising those salaries as well. When we look and see some of the deserts that take place across the state where there may not be very many services, I think it was absolutely essential with the early childhood education approach that we had, that we recognize that we can provide services. Some of our school systems have stepped in, working as we have universal access for four-year-olds, for pre-K, working towards that for 3-year-olds as well. We've really tried to work there. But you're right, that pipeline is so important. And I was proud as a state senator and proud as lieutenant governor that we have the Center of Excellence for Early Childhood Education that's actually housed at Western New Mexico University. There's going to be a whole lot more need for that.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think it's important to recognize that this isn't just childcare, it's also economic development. There are the parents that can go to work. There are maybe the young parents that will be able to go to college while their kids are being cared for. But there's also the people who are going to operate the centers that are going to care for the child, and the teachers. All of those people, if they're paid a decent wage, are going to be able to care for their own families.
Absolutely. And, I had mentioned in the press conference some personal stories that I had. I can remember a family who had come to me. They were former students of mine. I saw them grow up as children, and they had their young family, and really worried because they couldn't make it working full time and providing for childcare. And I never forgot that. And so grateful. That family ended up having to move away, more than 10 years ago, live in another state. I called them personally and I thanked them for putting it on the radar, the struggles that families had. And so I called them last week and I thanked them for sharing their experiences. And even though they couldn't benefit from it, other families are going to benefit from that. And so it's very instrumental to have heard from them. I also shared an example of two young people who are in Albuquerque, school graduates of UNM. The wife is going to medical school, doing her residency right now. It's a game changer because now New Mexico's on the radar to keep that professional, that medical provider right here in our state because we're providing back for families.
No, that makes sense. And I thought the governor had a really good point in her story is that the people who are two professional families who make just above the cutoff for getting help with any child care, that's really, even though they're making a good living, they're not suffering, it's still a huge chunk of their expendable income. And if you can save that or use it to buy your car that you need because yours broke, or invest in your retirement, or save for your kids fees for college since tuition is free, it's such a load off your back.
It really is, and it goes back to the economic development, which I look at it as economic gardening. And economic gardening, we're working from within. We're putting our tax dollars investing, not expenditures, but investments right back in our families. And so what we're doing is we're sending the message that our New Mexican families matter to us. We're going to do all that we can from cradle to career to provide access opportunities. I came from a large family. My dad had 14 brothers, four sisters. And of that large family, I was the first one that was able to go on to college and to get a teaching degree. I wouldn't have had that opportunity to have that access had it not been for Pell Grants, had it not been for other scholarships that may be available to help me really start changing the course of poverty. That's what we're doing for families, is making sure that we can provide access.
Education is the key. And what happened in the United States is we let education get so expensive that even if you went to college, a lot of people, A, don't finish. So they don't have the degree, but they do have the debt. And B, even if you finish, you owe so much money, your choices are really limited. And in New Mexico, people can go to college and not be burdened by debt if they do all their work and put in the time,
Yeah, and I give credit to people like Senator Michael Sanchez, who for
right?
years championed the lottery scholarship that really made a promise to high school graduates of the state that if you graduate from New Mexico high school, you're going to have your tuition paid for. As education and college got more expensive, we couldn't keep up with the pace of what that was costing for tuition. So we did two things. With the higher education trust fund that's in place, we're sitting at nearly $1 billion to
Wow.
keep that promise if ever there's a downturn in the economy, having that trust fund that's there for higher education to keep that promise of the lottery scholarship for high school graduates. But the beauty of it is we recognize that not everybody went after high school to get a college degree. They may want to go now, not only for a 2 year, 4 year college degree, but an opportunity to get a certification, to opportunity to work in the career vocational fields that we so desperately need. That was the opportunity scholarship that was passed under our administration, and couldn't be more proud for that access for higher education as well.
No, and that's huge. And I think a lot of people are always saying we have to have vocational education, which is correct. But then they miss the fact that we have so much already. We have a really good foundation, whether you're talking about working in movies or going into the solar industry or, becoming a cosmetologist. There are a lot of programs now. And especially the ones that are being funded, let's say to go be a biohazard waste removal, that's 10 weeks of training that's free, if you take advantage of it. So I really think the state, if we do our work as individuals, has offered a lot of pathways for people to succeed.
And that was the whole goal, is offering the pathways, the accessibility, and removing the barriers that oftentimes keep families from having that certification, that degree,
Yep.
moving it forward, because it does come down to education. And what a wonderful opportunity where we have so many capital outlay dollars right now,
Yep.
billions of dollars that are needed to build our roads, our water systems, our bridges, our infrastructure. We need those workers. Why not utilize the opportunity scholarship to train them? That's what we're doing.
That's a great point. And then maybe appoint somebody like Czar in charge of making sure we spend all our money, because so much of it sits in pots and doesn't get, actually expended. So that could be the next plan, is to help the governor make everybody spend down in her last year in office.
Yeah, I would love to do that because there was a time when we hit the recession and we were at the 0% reserves that I talk about.
Yep.
We had to claw back so many projects so many projects because the dollars weren't done spent. Those projects now have multiplied in the amount of cost to get
Yep.
those done. We want to make sure that we can do it before costs rise even more.
No, that's the thing that it's kind of like the whole fight about whether we should have built the rail runner or not. It's there now, it's being used, and maybe it should be used more, but if you had waited to build it when you're gonna need it a lot because the highway can't expand because of tribal lands, you wouldn't be able to afford it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like that idea, and I'll have to present that to DFA of how
Uh,
we're going to get those dollars moving.
yeah, oh, good, good, and, that'll be exciting. Well, they kind of did it during the remember the spending, was it pandemic? It was the recession, the 2008 recession. They had a guy in charge of getting the ARA dollars out. I think that was the
Yeah,
whenever the
absolutely. That
yeah,
there's a absolutely, and I think that again, that's important that those dollars are cycling through our communities because again, there's progress that's taking place, and I know it's frustrating right now because we have a lot of orange barrels across the state,
right?
um, but that does signify progress. We're
Yep.
investing in our roads, but there's more that we can and should be doing.
No, that is absolutely true. And on that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
We make renewable doable. We're positive energy solar for a cleaner, brighter future for all. Positive energy's the right call. Feel good about your energy bill. Help save the planet too. Your trusted solar company, working hard for you. Generate positive energy. Positive energy solar.
We're back with Conversations Different and Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales talking about the investments New Mexico is making in families, especially when it comes to caring for young children and in education. Now, one of the complaints that people make, and I think it's fair, is that we've spent a lot on education and public education that's been called a moonshot, and the test results and all the things that people do to measure outcomes don't seem to be moving yet. When do you think that's going to happen?
Well, I think that when we look at the opportunities that we've created in the state of New Mexico, I think it's important to show where we've invested, to recognize that oftentimes that we're used, that we're last when it comes to education. I mean, the reality of it is that's on a standardized test that measures reading and math. It doesn't take into account all the things that are happening across the state of New Mexico that are wonderful things that are happening. We invested heavily in our professionals. And I think that's important to point out because I never feel that we're throwing dollars at a problem. We're actually building up the system because when we came in, it was extremely important for the governor to recognize that we weren't there to shut schools down. We were there to build schools up. And that's what we've done. In order to build schools up, you got to have those professionals within the classroom, knowing that across the country, we have vacancy rate issues. In the state of New Mexico, we came in as the lowest paid educators in the region. Today, they sit at the highest paid. That's the investment that's important because they're the ones that are going to be there to help educate our children. But when we see past the oftentimes easily attacked areas of a standardized test, again, any educator will tell you that there's so much more to the education system than what is on a test score. So I don't really look at that as much as the gain that I see. And obviously, we want our students to be reading. We want them to have the math skills. We want them to have the critical thinking skills. And we're investing in that. The governor working together with our legislative bodies like Senator Mimi Stewart, recognizing the importance of science, of reading, importance of literacy, we're doing that. And so while we're working on after school programming, making sure that our kids have somewhere safe to go that would engage them, we're not focusing so much on student achievement, which are test scores, or student proficiency, which can be moved around depending on the political will or the times. We're focusing on student engagement and
Right.
making sure that students have the opportunity to be engaged, whether it's out there in work-based learning in communities to help solve real-world problems that we have, or whether they're needing extra remediation and tutoring when it comes to reading and math. That's where we're investing our dollars. And I think it's important to recognize that in the state, we're doing a lot of good things that necessarily may not show up on a standardized test scores within the next year or the next 2 years, but they're going to continue to show progress across our state.
Yep. I have to think that when the children who got to go to preschool, good preschools, or maybe had better childcare than they might have, let's say they went to their grandma's house and sat in front of the TV or something, or were watched by the neighbor. I think when those kids get to kindergarten, we have to think that they're going to be better ready to learn, which will improve their progress or help affect their progress all the way through. I mean, that's kind of the hope, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. And I think we recognize that the rush isn't to get a child ready to read by kindergarten. I think that that's the wrong approach that we take. We're human beings. We're made up of two hemispheres in our brain, the critical thinking part and the creative part. Recognizing that as they're in an early childhood quality program, a high quality program, they're learning, their brains are connecting, not necessarily just to focus on the left side of the brain, but also the right side, which is the relationships, the understanding of how to work with each other, how to get along with each other, how to play, and the importance of learning through play, or what that means in a civilized society. So I think that these are the approaches that we have, and recognizing that it's not the goal to necessarily just have a child be able to read by the time they enter kindergarten. We want them to be ready to learn, to
Right.
have the ability to learn and to adapt on whatever is needed in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah, half the success in life is getting along and being able to, approach new information, process it, and then go out and do it. And that's really one of the things you learn in school that's not measured on a standardized test.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look across the country, so much fear that's there. When we talk about keeping our children safe, providing support for mental health, providing support for emotional health, opportunities for students to have outlets. I think that's important. Just today, unfortunately, my son's in eighth grade. Students were asked to go home immediately after school because they had a suicide, a 14-year-old. And I believe that what had taken place right there is real across this country.
Yeah.
Making sure that we're investing heavily within our students across the state is important, and that's why, as lieutenant governor, I've worked closely with the governor, with our district attorneys, with the FBI, and all of our law enforcement, combining together with our educational professionals and putting in the first ever safety school summit. This is going to be the third year that we go in and bring in all these professionals together to find strategies that are going to help, anywhere from making sure that we have any type of issues, whether it's guns that are found in school, or whether the issues with bullying or harassing, or
Yeah.
whether the issue is making sure that environmentally our labs are safe without toxins that may be harmful. These are the type of things that we approach from a school safety standpoint. And it's so important because it's so easily available to rush to judgment, looking at a standardized test score and not recognizing the many other components that go in to making sure we're building up a school system that's effective and safe for all.
No, that's completely true. Although it's nice to get really good grades on your reading as well. And I was during that press conference for early childhood after we were meeting with the governor and her advisors. One of the things that seems true to me is that if parents don't read, so you've got kids in kindergarten, first grade, and their parents could be 27, 28, 35, whatever. If the 27-year-olds are playing video games and not reading, the kids aren't going to read. And I don't care what you do in school. So we have to kind of refocus our community, I think, back into the love of reading and literacy.
Yeah, and there's so much love out there. And I know that with the governor's efforts and push to really have that focus, how we're going to improve literacy while looking at the big picture of how we're going to have an environment that's well rounded. That's the approach that we're taking.
Yeah. I like that. And that includes some of the things that have happened, like the investment in having school lunches for everybody, that you don't have to sign up and fill out a bunch of papers and then have everyone look at you because you're on free lunch.
Absolutely. And I can remember I was one of those students who was on free lunch. And I can remember I was given a little yellow card that you would take so they could punch. We've come so far
Yeah.
along. Many thanks to Senator Michael Padilla, who championed that, who we talk across the country. Again, another first of
Yeah.
what's taking place across the country is right here in New Mexico. So I push back often when we hear we're dead last or we're last. No, we've really made a lot of progress, and we're going to continue to make progress if we open up and see a wider lens of what's actually taking place.
Now, that's one of the kind of curiosities about our state is that as much as everyone, we love the culture, we love the language, we love that we're New Mexico, everyone can tell you that which ancestor came with Oñate, or which one came, at the turn of the century or whenever we got here. But we have a tendency to criticize ourselves in a way that I was lucky and I lived a lot of other places. And you could be in Dirt West Texas with all the kids in the classroom a year behind what I was coming from North Public in Las Vegas, and they would have told you it was the best school ever. And I don't know why we're not more proud of all of the many accomplishments we have.
I think podcasts like this, the work that you do to get information out there that look past just the one-liners that people often like to throw around. I travel all around the country and I promote what we've done in higher ed. I share how we've been making progress with our public education system, really focusing around the culture components of who we are as a state, our tribal, our colonial communities. And then, of course, next week, I'll be going to DC to share how we continue to be a leader when it comes to early childhood education. Wherever I go across the country, whatever state I'm in, I hear from people in those states saying how they feel like they use a stat. They'll say, we're last in this or we're last in that. So everywhere you go, the problems are still the same, but it's looking within a state and saying, what are we doing right in conjunction with how do we improve the areas that we need to? I used to be a coach, and that was the way that we won championships, by recognizing the things and strengths that we can build on, celebrating those things, and then seeing the areas where we need to improve. By recognizing that as a whole system, you make your way into a championship realm, which is what we're trying to do in the state of New Mexico.
No, that's absolutely right. And on that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We're back with Conversations Different, talking to Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales about the work New Mexico has been doing in education. I mean, obviously, you're in 1 year left, and we have a governor's election next year. You had decided not to run for governor and go do something maybe, back to university work, teaching. What do you guys do to cement your legacy in the last year?
I'm proud of the work that the governor, myself, our whole administration, our cabinet has done, but there's still more work to do. And so I think often, just like last week, we had the mega announcement of universal childcare. Those things are huge, and I'm proud of that. But it also inspired me to know there's still more work to be done. And we still have a lot of time. We have, fortunately, a healthy budget that we're able to do more to help families. It inspired me and motivated me to do more. And you're right, I did make the decision not to run for governor. And it was a hard decision. I've been in office for 21 years, that the people across the state have trusted me to be in there. But I had to make a decision. And the reality of it was my daughter, she's a junior in high school. I didn't want to spend the next 18 months, her junior and senior year, out there campaigning and missing so many important events. I can always come back and run for any office in the future, but I'll never get that other opportunity, that chance to be a dad. So I chose family.
Yeah, that's a great choice too, because you're really very young when you consider that we have 80-year-old people in the U.S. Senate, and how old's the president? 79. I mean, you have a lot of life ahead of you, and you don't get those years back.
Yeah, so I don't doubt the decision I made, and we'll see what comes next. But I have to tell you that with the year and a half that we have to go in our administration, we have a lot more to do. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, and I'm committed with the governor to seeing that through.
Yeah. I think one thing that's going to be interesting is whether the attacks that continue, because there is some criticism of early childhood for everybody, or childcare for everybody, because I think they're calling it nannies for millionaires kind of thing. And you have to, how do you fight that with still being kind of pleasant? Because one of the things I like about New Mexico is we're still not quite as nasty to each other on the political front as other states.
I've taken great pride as lieutenant governor to run a chamber in the Senate that's going to be respectful. Both sides of the aisle, and it starts with me to make sure that I'm respectful and fair to the minority as well as to the majority. And that's something that I'm extremely proud of, because in the sense of what New Mexicans have, at the end of the day, we all want a better New Mexico for all of our families. So I take it from that standpoint there. When you look across the country and what's happening in the division that takes place, I do hear some of the complaints that this is never going to work, that it's giving millionaires free childcare. I don't really see that. First of all, we don't have very many millionaire families across the state of New Mexico.
Yep.
But other than that, is that we recognize that it is for families, and it is to provide the support that's there. You hear often that our taxes are going to be raised. You hear often about how this is going to be paid for. But a lot of times I don't hear from those very same people complaining about the tariffs that have been put in place, where taxes are assessed on people all across the state. So I kind of just take it as sometimes there's narratives that are in place that people want to put out there. But I know at the end of the day that every family is going to benefit from this in the state. And I take pride in that.
Do you guys worry at all that because there's been federal funding cuts and, all the weird Doge budget cuts, et cetera, that we won't have the freedom to do what we want to do because you're going to have to be plugging holes that are going to be left unfunded from the feds?
Fortunately, the state has created a healthy budget. Oftentimes we talk about we're at 36% reserves, but I used to sit on that finance committee. And I know when there's dollars that are put for trust funds that we've created for those rainy days that we often hear about, the state really sits at nearly 100% reserves. So we can withstand some of those impacts that have taken place, but we can't do it for too long of a time. And I think it's wise of the governor to call us in special session to address those things right now, so that we can make sure that we're having impacts that may take place with Medicaid, that we're able to assist the families across the state. I think that it's important to recognize also that we're committed in the programs to be self-sustaining as much as possible. But Inez, I also chair the Military Base Planning Commission, and the military bases in our state are extremely important, and we see what that means. So when you have the threats coming from the federal government that things are going to be done if you're not going along the political will, it does concern me, and we have to find that balancing point. And I've been able to work with our bases to make sure that we have our federal delegation who continually supports us in the way that they do. At the end of the day, I don't take to threats very lightly. And when you have the federal government who are saying that we're going to cut funding for this or for that, those funds are taxpayer funds. Those dollars belong to the taxpayers across the state of New Mexico and should not be used as political ransom to get a vote one way or another.
No, that's true. And I know the cuts to Hispanic serving institutes, if those go ahead and they hurt the colleges, that's going to be a kind of a tough row for, Highlands and Western, all the colleges in the state.
Yeah, and we've seen when you talk about equity, when you talk about diversity, when you talk about inclusion, those are the things that make New Mexico who we are. We're strong because of our diversity, equity, and inclusion opportunities. We're strong because we recognize and we celebrate our culture. We celebrate our languages. We celebrate our food, our dance, our customs. Not only do we celebrate it, but we respect it. And we want to make sure that we recognize that we put that out there when there's threats that come in because we're too diverse, we include too much, or because we have equity. No, we're going to continue to celebrate that.
Yeah. No, and if we didn't celebrate having Hispanic people go to college, we wouldn't have anybody enrolled. I grew up a few blocks from Highlands, and I saw firsthand what it meant to someone to come become a teacher and then lift their families to the middle class. It was huge.
Your story is the same as mine, Inez, and what a wonderful story that we have more opportunities for families to be able to do that. So I'm extremely excited about those possibilities.
Yeah. It's exciting. So what's in your future in the next couple of months? Like, what are you going to be working on mostly?
Well, we're going to go into special session. We're going to be addressing some of the issues that we need to. I know that public safety is still a huge issue that we have at forefront. to recognize that we have to make sure that we're doing the best we can to keep families safe across the state. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done. We have to have collaboration with the legislature, and so I know I'll be busy doing that as well. As you see other things that are coming around the corner, there's a lot of issues that we have to deal with across the state. Education being one of them. Even though we're doing some good things that are moving us in that direction, there's still more work that has to be done. We have a lot of dollars that are going out for public projects, for our infrastructure, for our capital outlay needs. We have to make sure that the dollars are flowing and getting to those communities as much as possible. So there's a whole lot of work that has to be done over the next couple of months. But I'm looking forward to that. When you have the concern of medical malpractice and you have the shortage of physicians that we see across the state, how can we continue to build that system up? Well, we're going to address that. We're going to find solutions of what needs to be done. But we're doing that in a sense, as I shared the story of those two UNM graduates who hopefully will choose to stay in New Mexico because now they have childcare provided for their families. That's how you're going to continue to build, not just from one area, but looking at it from a wider lens.
No, that's totally true. And I know with the school systems, the public school systems, you're going to have to put in place and really move forward on Yazzie Martinez in a way that satisfies the courts, or otherwise there's going to be a special, whatever they call those people in charge of all of our schools. And that's not
Yeah.
something we would want.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to get into the situation that we had, unfortunately, when it was for many years with our our Jackson lawsuit,
Yep.
and because of that, we don't want to get there. But I do commend our public education department, the Lano Foundation, our tribal communities, our colonial communities all across the state that are, as we speak, traveling around, getting great qualitative and quantitative data of how we can address that. I don't know, Inez, if you're aware that when I was a state senator, I was part of that early lawsuit with MALDIF against the state and not providing an adequate education for English language learners, for our disadvantaged students, for our special education students. And so I was proud to be part of that. And I'm proud of the collaboration that's taken place to have an education system that we can be proud of.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. And I think having the tribal voices actually heard and listened to hopefully will really get to the point where people get what they need to thrive.
And in building the schools up, as we talked about, it was our vision not to shut schools down, but to build them up. It was
Right.
also our vision as we addressed the teacher shortage and we raised compensation for educators, that it was important that we also had educators in the school systems that the students can see themselves in. They can see the students, the educators that are speaking their language, that have come from their backgrounds, that understand their customs and their cultures. And I'm proud that we've made a huge effort to have those educators within the classroom that the students can be proud of, and they know that educator understands them as well.
Yep. Yeah. At North Public, the teacher would say, "Yeah, you're poor. I was poor too. Now do better." And it was really from a point of love and understanding because they didn't let us fail at anything. But they understood that a lot of kids, I mean, I had kids in my first grade that didn't actually have bathrooms. So we definitely came from a place where a lot of the kids were really poor.
Yeah, and given an opportunity where sometimes in our cultures, that love comes in the form of tough love.
Mhm.
That you can and you will do better. And I know that that's again, that's what makes New Mexico so special. And any graduation or early start to the school year talk that I give, I always share with students: be proud of who you are. Be proud of where you come from. Be proud of this state. And if ever, wherever life takes you to go into college or the military or the workforce, if you have to leave or you stay in the state, always be proud of where you've come from. And I think that message is ringing more and more true because we have to make sure that we recognize the good things that are happening while we address the areas that we need to improve.
No, definitely. And maybe someday we'll have you back and we'll talk about Children, Youth, and Families Department and all the investments that are going to go in there because that's a huge problem. With childcare, you're taking care of kids with families and maybe that are in better home situations, hopefully. Although some of them aren't going to be, but with CYFD, if we can't get that working and the kids helped, we're going to still be in a mess.
I agree, and that's an area again that we'll look to improve. And I don't believe that further having a bureaucratic approach is the way to go. I
Mhm.
think that makes things more difficult. But it's about talking to families, talking to the advocates, talking about people who really understand the system, including our very own CYFD employees across the state that can give us great insight. that's important that we do that, and we're open to that.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, on that note, this has been another Conversations Different, and we'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support. We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.